I can still remember first hearing Kate Bush's music, and I credit my dear sister for this because at 7 years old she insisted on having solely Wuthering Heights repeating on our loudspeakers for about a week. You had a temper! So I didn't appreciate the sheer originality and vocal talent. All I was able to hear, at a fairly young age if I may be so humble, was self-indulgent, shrill-voiced and abrasive noise. But, to paraphrase Bush's own work, I never really understood her, because I never really tried. Kate Bush strives to communicate and express her ideas via more than just auditory methods. It's what informs most of the direction of her music videos. She knew very well, and indeed still knows very well, the fine potential of body language in this regard, how powerfully captivating and meaningful even the minor accentuation of usually more sedate uses of the body can be. And as we'll see, many forms of dance and mime have been utilised by her in order to say something a little more. A close-up shot in the man with the child in his eyes is an opportunity for her to express a variety of emotion in the manner of mime. It can be seen in the exaggerated widening of her eyes, for instance. In this case, it successfully lends a more dangerous mood to the story than the lyrics suggest on their own. Then there's the sudden change from the relaxed, confident, almost smug expression of perceived reciprocated love, to the jolted, more timid and on-guard countenance which accompanies a crucial turning point in the song. It's a very confidently used and very different language in an interplay with written and spoken language. Different imagery and new emotion are all being evoked and suggested by virtue of the direction of the facial expressions and body of just one person. The man with the child in his eyes. And then there is broader choreography to consider for what it expresses. Take when the camera pulls back and Kate extends her limbs out in a movement reminiscent of something like a plant blooming. She hits an apex of tension and full extension, which effectively gifts a tone of resolute pride to the accompanying lyrics. Nobody knows about my man. Just seconds later, she conducts a well-controlled, relaxed and slow drop of the limbs and her back to occupy a lying position, and this gives the illusion that Kate has calmly floated down to the ground from a height, further suggesting her placement in a new dimension of fantastical romantic idealism. Then there is the example of when Kate transitions from a verse to a chorus. She uses her body to make a specific sweeping gesture, which could be indicative of the motion of a calm wave. It's as if she's making a clean slate, washing away the old for a new lyrical installment, a new development of the story and character, as well as the mood of the song. This interpretation is made more relevant by the lyrics. The titular character, whom is intentionally presented as idealized and almost spectre-like, is related semantically to the sea. They think he's lost on some horizon, telling me about the sea. As such, the sea could be a representation of the mystery of passion and emotional intimacy and love that the speaker feels. This idea is further complemented by the curious sensuality of the dance. It's almost yoga-like, what with the heaving of the chest and the shoulders. The final posture especially evokes a sense of meditation. It's all quite suggestive, but the full orchestration helps finalize the overall tone as ultimately wholesome. The midpoint of the second verse especially serves to bring a sense of honor, a different and quite surprising and somber mood. And Kate quite often plays with expectation in this way, experimental as she is to the last. A lot of her songs employ repetition in various ways, and are often resultantly extremely rich in instrumental variety. In The Big Sky and Babooshka, layers are added and taken away that progressively intensify those senses of optimism and potential and daring even. And though repetitive in structure, they're never uniform. A kind of musical party happens in both songs. Different vocal textures come to accompany each other, which is especially befitting of the lyrical body of The Big Sky. And that sky is a rather ambiguous force, which the lyrics often reference as the only thing the speaker feels is deserving of their attention. As such, that sky represents all potential and hope to me. It implies the process of a new journey, emotionally leaving behind previous circumstance and things of past concern to engage with possibility instead. At first, this may seem quite a heavy contrast to the subject matter of the two tracks that precede it, the first two titles being direct references to feelings of inadequacy and neuroses concerning love and attraction. However, the album as a whole can be said to be very much about deep challenging longing for more positive circumstance and mental equilibrium. And I do wonder if Bush was intentionally relying on that figuration of the challenging nature of love, the representation of it as a fierce hound, as an intertextual force. After all, she has never been shy to borrow from and expand on the featured ideas, motifs and language of Anglo-Irish and English literature. Shakespeare had the ever-optimistic Orsino rely on this aforementioned allegory when describing his unrequited and all-consuming infatuation with Olivia.
Will you go hunt, my lord?
What, Curio?
The hart.
Why, so I do, the noblest that I have. But when mine eyes did see Olivia first, methought she purged the air of pestilence. That instant was I turned into a hart, and my desires, like fell and cruel hounds, ere since pursue me.
Love and relationships can be said to form some of the cores of Kate Bush's semantic and thematic interest. Not only romantic relationships, though. The types explored can vary from parental to sexual. I should not put those two so close together. Relationships with technology, as well as with social systems of control. Relationships with our own neurotic afflictions. You name it. I quite love it when she explores the psychologically violent nature of relationships, which is why, along with most of the world it seems, I hold Running Up That Hill, and Babooshka in particularly high regard. The former's voice seems to belong to a transfixed and very dedicated lover, frustrated at their significant other for a seeming lack of, if not devotion, then dedication. They suggest this more overtly through the wonderful alliterative phrase, "Let's exchange the experience," a solution that they believe would lead to a more successful relationship. This success is represented by the implicit imagery in the running up of hills, roads, buildings, all archetypal but not especially grand or dramatic feats, which are all conquered in particular linguistic and abstract contexts. If our circumstances were swapped, we would have a more successful and perhaps more passionate and lively relationship.
And make a deal with God, and I get him to swap our places. Be running up that road, be running up that hill, be running up that building.
Certain lexical choices are a result of the appropriate reliance on the destructive force of Mother Nature as a motif.
You don't wanna hurt me, but see how deep the bullet lies. Unaware and tearing it asunder. There is thunder in our hearts.
This implies unintended damage on the significant other's behalf and acts as an acknowledgement of their lack of positivity for the speaker. But there is a degree of ambiguity to this verse too, though it could just be me. Who exactly is being addressed as unaware here? Is it the speaker or the significant other? It could very well be both, considering that both hearts are characterized by the classic motif of thunder. In addition, both are clearly tenacious and aggressive and in love, especially when one considers the choreography. And again, this isn't some pretentious and cheap accompaniment to the song. It appropriately illustrates the relationship dynamic that the song is about, the core of its thematic and dramatic intrigue. Undoubtedly cooperative in character, there are various characteristics which appropriately remind one of combat and martial arts. For one instance, the dress appears to borrow from Aikido or even Kendo dress maybe. Furthermore, there are overt symbols of archery, and there are dramatic pushes, grapples, and throws, as well as the overt portrayal of attempted escape from grasp. Various stages of it are also no doubt portraying physical intimacy. They climb all over each other, they spoon, and at one point appear to be appearing out of each other as if they're birthing, and that's a whole other source of fascination. It puts a romantic relationship in the context of the speaker's seeming understanding of what a relationship is for, or indeed life, that it is a crucial element in a highly competitive social reality. Babooshka, on the other hand, is far more cheeky and playful, not to mention cheaper, and not resultantly of the previous adjective, delightfully saucy and almost farcical. That infamous deception, instigated by the awareness of dying passion and the passage of time at the heart of Babooshka's narrative, is reminiscent of Escape by Rupert Holmes.
I've got to meet you by tomorrow noon and cut through all this red tape.
So she arranged a place to go
At a bar called O'Malley's.
to see if he would fall for her incognito.
So I waited with high hopes, and she walked in the place.
And when he laid eyes on her, he got the feeling they had met before.
I knew her smile in an instant. I knew the curve of her face. It was my own lovely lady.
Reminds him of his little lady. Capacity to give.
But not only is the deception intentional in the case of Babooshka, it's also a little less sentimental and less conclusive. It's more brash and, quite frankly, more cool. There's laid-back mystery to it. The repeated triplet of synthesized notes has an almost causal, interrogative character. It's teasing in its insistency, adding different elements each round, just like all good mystery really, in that it periodically teases and tweaks bits of information before a surprising reveal, which would be the chorus in this case, in which Kate reveals the realised form of her character's invention with endearing abandon, eccentricity, humour and charisma. And there is definitely an element of a Bond song to it. The chord progression isn't dissimilar at points.
Babooshka, 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 yeah, yeah. Babooshka, babooshka, babooshka.
The song is, in large part, defined by its tragic irony, and this can be credited to a notable linguistic quirk, a grammatical deviation in the first verse.
She couldn't have made a worse move.
What should be worse becomes the superlative worst, and is thereby the element which gives the strongest implication that the main character's paranoia is what leads to the breakdown of the marriage. Kate said in 1980, "The whole idea of the song is really the futility and the stupidness of humans and how by our own thinking, spinning around in our own ideas, we come up with completely paranoid facts. So in her situation, she was in fact suspicious of a man who was doing nothing wrong. He loved her very much indeed." And would you look at that, like all truly transcendent art, or indeed stories of great cultural intrigue, it's had me talking and writing about it in more volume than the text all that commentary is even about. But that's Kate Bush for you. Her work is a talking point and an enigma because she does everything in her power to warrant that response. But she never seems to pursue that response, reclusive and humble as she is infamously known to be. Which leads me to an explanation for her still widespread admiration by people of all ages, and perhaps even the great secret to her utterly hypnotizing, timeless, masterly and considerable volume of work. A great BBC documentary released in 2014 heavily suggests, by sources like Del Palmer, who has worked with her closely for the majority of her career, that her ambitions in regard to realise pieces were more adequately met by the time of the production for Hounds of Love. But even Kate has been quoted as saying, "The worst thing is frustration at your own ability, not being able to do what you want to do." To which I would reply, I quite frankly fear what you could achieve if you had any more ability. Though I also suppose you can argue that that's what makes the great artists, how well they ultimately deal with creative restraints, whatever those restraints may be. Working within particular limitations always acts as a good lubricant to pure creativity. Perhaps that provides another reason for why she's so great, and has so captivated me over the last month and been a powerful means of intrigue. Maybe her feeling of inadequate ability, indicative of deep humility I would argue, not to conclusively analyse Kate Bush the person, is a constant driver of continual improvement, experimentation, and creative productivity. And if that doesn't aid in solidifying Kate Bush as a true artist, for that's what she is, not just a musician, then her clearly insistent and fearless ingenuity certainly does. She revels in the corruption of tonal expectation, in novel modes of expression, in unusual but inherently political and widely relevant narratives, and in the practice of a range of genres, methodologies, and forms. Having such competence across so many instruments, genres, and modes of performance, whilst also having the confidence to successfully break the rules attached to those, leading to the creation of pieces that have the capacity to offer a kind of meditation to listeners time and time again, for the majority of one's life, has to be respected and revered. Her shows at the Hammersmith Apollo in 2014 unfortunately completely passed me by, but I cling to faith that that wasn't the last set of performances Kate will ever produce, because my seat is already reserved as far as I'm concerned.